All right, we are officially live. Welcome to First Draft Friday. This is our kickoff. I'm so excited. I've been counting down the days, and I can't wait to dive in. So if you are a aspiring or published author, this is a bi-weekly live chat. You are in the right place. I'd love you to shout out in the comment section and say whether you're aspiring or published. And hey, I'm already seeing familiar names pop up. Yay. So just quickly, I'm going to talk about who we are and what we're going to talk about, and then we can dive in. So I'm Alessandra Torre. I write romance and contemporary fiction. I'm on the Authors AI team along with Cecelia Mecca, who writes historical romance, as well as you're jumping into a new genre too, right?
Jumping into contemporary, the big bad world of contemporary romance this summer under Bella Michaels. I'm excited about that. So, because I've done Scottish medieval for the last 3 years. So
welcome. There's a lot less research involved, so that's the good news.
I've noticed, yeah, but there's different kinds of research. It's a lot of fun. It's good to switch the brain a little, and it's been fun.
I absolutely agree. And both of us are on the team at Authors AI. First Draft Friday is brought to you by Authors AI, which is a really cool new company. We're launching on Monday, but the site is open now for authors if you want to swing by. And Authors AI has a technology called Marlowe, who reads, analyzes, and critiques your novel in less than 15 minutes. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about Marlowe today and what she can do for you. But if you are wanting a developmental edit of your novel before we are done with this presentation today, feel free to check her out because she does some really cool things, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So hi guys, I'm seeing a lot of published authors, so that's really great, and I know we have some aspiring ones who have registered as well. So today we're going to talk about craft, and this is kind of the focus of First Draft Fridays is on craft. There are so many podcasts and awesome events that are around marketing a book, but craft often gets neglected, and I know I'm as guilty of that as anyone. I will spend 4 hours learning about Facebook ads, and I never spend 4 hours learning about craft, which is a sad event. So we're going to talk about some struggles that we have with craft. And at the end, before we sign off, we're going to be choosing 5 winners using random.org to win their choice of craft books. Great. We have some really great prizes like Write Naked. This is by Jennifer Probst. And you can see all my tags and bookmarks in it. Have you read this book?
I've read that book. That was one of the first ones someone recommended. Another author recommended. It's awesome.
It's really great. It and On Writing by Stephen King are both like easy to devour and easy to understand and not intimidating. And that for me, if I can find an unintimidating anything having to do with craft that's unintimidating, then that's my thing.
Yeah, it's a great book.
So what do you struggle with craft?
So I would say probably the big one that sticks out for me is pacing, just because I know, well, that's all important, right? But I know how important it is to, get to the end of the chapter and they want to just keep turning that page, or not even the end of the chapter. We don't want to lose them anytime, right? And that's kind of the goal. So, I dabbled a little bit in paranormal, and I actually found that strangely easier because there were bad guys and there's just so much happening where, and even in the medieval, I have battles and things like that. I'm finding even with the contemporary, pacing is something I'm struggling with probably even more than usual because I'm really focused on just the romance, and, I don't have any battles to kind of, okay, what can we do now that, is exciting. And it's something I'm always conscious of. And I know we're getting a little ahead, but when I ran my first Marlowe, I was really happy to see that there was a pacing section because for me, that's what's really important. I feel, good about a lot of areas and, beats, and I plot pretty heavily, not pretty heavily, but I do plot. And, since we're writing romance, character is always really important. And I start there, but plot is, I think you're muted. There you go. Sorry, pacing is something that I'm always kind of conscious of, and I struggle with probably the most.
I'm the same way. I think, and I noticed this really with my first couple of novels, is while I was writing the book, I'd start getting so excited, like when I was getting near the end, because it'd be like, oh my gosh, like, especially my first book, right? Like I'm about to finish my first book, right? So suddenly my scenes are getting shorter, and like I am like rocking and rolling through this happy ever after. Like, I mean, my people are like, hey, love you, bye. You know, I mean, I was so like, so gung-ho to get to the end. And then I could be celebrated that I wrote a book that I through that, and my early reviews reflected that. So in the beginning, like many authors, I mean, I didn't have an editing budget. I didn't know the value of editing, and so I just, you know, I didn't have an editor to tell me, or I didn't have Marlo to tell me. And what Cecelia is talking about is so just a quick thing. When you submit your manuscript to Marlo, you get back a 25-page report that talks about so many different things, from character development to pacing to actually graphing your plots, highs and lows on the chart, to overused words, to cliche finder. There's just so many different things that I can point out. So we call it like a super quick and honest developmental edit or critique, and pacing is one of the things there. So that's that I always look at, because it has, and like you said, with a mystery or action or really anything that has that action can be pretty clearly spread out, and we can do a good job, and we have constantly like a next road mark to hit. But with just contemporary romance, it's a lot harder, and you don't have that. That's when a lot of people are like, oh, I think I'm gonna have my heroine get kidnapped right now, because I need something to happen other than just like another date where they talk about the feelings. So pacing can be a lot harder with that. And that's something, before I wrote romance, and a lot of people kind of write off romance like, oh, you know, it's whatever, easy to write and whatever, but it's really not, because you have to keep that tension and keep those emotional highs and lows when you don't have oftentimes a big battle or something.
There's no battles. I'm writing in, small town Pennsylvania, New York. So I'm like, well, there's no traditional big medieval battles. So yeah, I'm finding that a definite, and it's funny. I wasn't surprised at all that Marlo was basically like, 50 to 70%. We have a little problem here, a little lows. I was like, yeah, that's kind of where I struggle.
That's where I was getting a little bored with writing. Yeah. And I'd love to know in the comment section what you struggle with craft, and so please feel free to shout out your biggest thing. So pacing, I agree with you 100%. And my other thing that I really just started learning how to do character development. And I've written 23 novels, and I didn't really start learning about craft until like book 6 or 7. I was just like winging it, and so I've gotten better and better about character development as I've gone, but it's been a slow process. But the more you develop your characters, the easier the writing of that book is, and the more consistent it is. So that's how are you with character development, and do you have any tips for creating powerful characters?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you what you're using to kind of learn about that, because I know for me, there's like pivotal, these resources that really stick out. Romancing the Beat was one for me. It was the first time I read about beats. I went through a few novels before I was like, okay, fine, I'll look at this whole plotting thing. I'm a pantser. I don't plot, but I do now. That was, that one, and a few other, the book that you showed earlier. But another one was Creating Character Arcs, K.M. Weiland. And that was the first one that I read that was specifically dedicated just to writing character. And I'll be honest, I thought I was good to go. I taught English for 20 years. I was, I used to train other teachers and worked for the State Department of Ed teaching writing. So I actually came into this really kind of, I guess, it's not a nice way to say, kind of arrogant. Like, I've wanted to write my whole life. I've taught other people how I can do this. But no, writing a novel, writing fiction is so different. And so just like you, I wrote a few novels thinking I've read my whole life, I've taught writing, I got this, but it's its own beast. And so I, like you, went after a few novels in, I was like, I need to go back to the drawing board, learn craft. And that was the first one that I specifically read about character development that really kind of opened my eyes. And I still use kind of a lot of the strategies that, I don't know if you've ever read it or heard of that one, but Kay Weiland, I love her stuff.
I love her. I've got her book, her outlining your novel book right here. She is a really great, if you're looking for someone who isn't intimidating and can break it down. I wrote down, you said creating character arcs. Is that the book by?
Yes, the book, and then she has a workbook too. And I don't do the workbook things because I just like, I want to dive in and just do it myself. That is one that I think I printed it online, and I was a companion to it. And I physically actually completed the workbook. And then now most of that I kind of have in a spreadsheet, and that's what I use to create or start creating a lot of the characters. We do other things, and I've read other things, but that's the one that if you haven't done any work specifically on that area, like it changed kind of my whole process really. Because romance is character based, and so like creating those really good characters, you kind of don't, not that you have a choice anywhere, but you really don't have a choice. I mean, it's, for me, it starts there. So
that's a really good point, because I was thinking, I'm in the midst of teaching a boot camp for aspiring authors, and so it really takes you back to like, how did I used to do, like you have to go back to the mindset of not knowing how, we do things without knowing how we do them now, because they're ingrained. We've written so many novels, and we don't stop and go, okay, what is my process for creating, a character? So it's easy to forget. But I was sitting there thinking through different genres, because I do write suspense as well, and a lot of great, a lot of books, a lot of series, they don't have a lot of character development that much. They're more action based, right? Like you've got, I don't know, some thriller character who's, has a 20-book series, and there's not really a lot about him personally with each one. It's more like what he's doing. Where romance, you got to deliver on those characters, because otherwise they're not invested and they don't care, and you don't have that action to move forward and engage them in the plot. So you have to. And you talked about resources. One thing that really helped me, which I never would have thought, because I'm just not this type of person. You talked about the worksheet. I'm going to look that up, because there's a lot of times you can print out like a questionnaire about your interview with your character or whatever. Those never do anything for me, because a lot of times they're really long and time consuming. And they're like, what kind of peanut butter does she like, or whatever? Like, I don't know, like questions that don't at all, right? I'm
the same.
But have you ever heard about using Enneagram?
No.
Enneagram. I'm probably mispronouncing it, because I can never spell it. Whenever I spell it, I always have to depend on Google to help me. But so Enneagram is a personality profiling system. So it's the same like oh, I'm analytical or whatever. But there's like 8 different types, and then there's like subtypes. But I watched a presentation that someone did last year at IncomCon, and she talked about really diving into that personality type. And so, because I'll tell you right now, I talk about the stumbling blocks to writing. Most people who quit their first books, they get writer's block, right? And then they wander away. A lot of times, at least half the time, writer's block is caused by, and David Libby just, there we go, Enneagram.
I'm gonna write this down.
Yeah, that's not how you spell it though. David, will you spell it for us? Because it's a mouthful. But a lot of times writer's block is really caused by you not knowing your characters. Like that's really what it is. Like you're sitting there and you don't know how your character is going to react to the situation you're put in, because you don't know your characters. And Enneagram basically it just really dives into, and in this presentation, she said, in romance, typically an alpha male is this character type. And then that character type responds in certain ways to these certain actions. And so that allows you, if your character bumps into someone in the street, do they apologize? Do they get angry? Do they keep walking? Like, how does the character react? And once you really know your character's personality, you can. So if I get stuck, I go to Enneagram. Here, put the spelling. I go to Enneagram personality profiles, and there's like, if you can put Enneagram in fiction and Google that, and there's just like, it's a rabbit hole you can get quickly lost into. But
I was just going to say, of course you had to mention this 2 weeks before a deadline, because I want to immediately get up and start learning it.
Yeah, don't do it unless you, it's easier for me. I try to quickly decide what personality type my character is, and then I just read about that personality, and then a lot of times it helps me with the way they talk to people, the way they interact, and the decisions that they make. So, yeah, so that's really cool. And a lot of, if you're a new author and you were listening to this, the typical path that you go down is you write characters that are just like you. Like, that's the easiest thing to do. And it's an easy crutch to fall on with your first book, and it's fine with your first book. But then once you start writing your second book and your third book, you've really got to expand your range and find other characters to write, and not write all the same books in the first character. So Marlo has a character section where she like puts the personality types and breakdown of aggression and of each character. And that's one of the first things I look at when I look at my report, is I want to make sure my 3 or 4 main characters are all very varied. And that my villain isn't like agreeable and friendly and cheerful all the time, you know, unless like he or she has a personality quirk that
I know I held my breath when I got the Marlowe Prize. It reminded me of when I get my editor's report back. I'm like, oh no, please, 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 you know. But it was actually just so awesome. I can't even. And I like, it's so easy to talk about this because it's actionable, right? So I honestly didn't know, is this going to be something that you just kind of, that's really cool and pretty and it looks great? No, this is. I kind of came at it at a good time, though. I was just finishing a manuscript, had sent it off to my editor, and then I had Marlo. So I had some time right in between there, and it was really cool. But that was something I looked at, too. I was like, oh, no, please. Because I was finished with the manuscript, and I don't love edits. And so I was like, oh, no, this is going to be a nightmare. It was okay, though. We did good.
Here's another comment from a user. I struggle with the belief I'm not wasting my time writing fiction. And this can apply, I mean, self-doubt it can be, that right there can be a trigger for writer's block. And that's something that I think everyone, I'm going to tell you right now, 20 novels in, you're going to struggle with it as much. I struggle with that all the time. And I think, oh, this book is terrible, and why am I writing this, and no one's ever going to want to read this. But that can, but you got to just push through it and get to the other side. Did it help with you having a background in craft and in teaching and in writing? I'm self-taught, so I didn't have, years of training.
You would have thought so, right? But honestly, it's just such its own unique thing that now part of me, most of me doesn't, but part of me wants to go back into the classroom. I taught 8th grade and take everything I know now and then bring that into kind of, this is a real world writing. Instead of doing a Venn diagram where we're comparing 2 stories and how they're similar, and which is kind of very contrived, I would love to go back in and talk about beats. I mean, how I managed to get through an entire education program and 20 years in education and not know about or know anything about beats. It's kind of ridiculous, really, when I look back. I think what we did and what I did in the classroom is very different than kind of the real life thing. So yeah, and I think that actually hurt me in the beginning because I really didn't think I needed that. I think a lot of people think their first book is a lot better than it is, but I really thought it was awesome and it wasn't. So
yeah, I think I'm trying to think who said this. It was such a great quote, and I wish I could know who to attribute it to. But they said, however you feel about your novel, you're typically wrong. So if you think it's amazing, you're typically wrong. And if you think it's horrific, you're typically wrong. So it's one of those, like, that's why we need editors. That's why we need beta readers. Marlo does not replace an editor. Like, that's not our goal with Marlo. But she is someone who, for that person who's afraid to send it to an editor and they, immediately want, I like the feedback from multiple different sources. So it's, can you, for somebody, because we have a lot of people joining us today or who are going to watch this later, who are not experienced and who are aspiring authors, can you give like an easy writing for dummies explanation of narrative beats?
Yeah, so Jamie Gold does a fantastic job, and I don't know if you've familiar with her stuff and her site. She has all the beat sheets. I would probably start there if I didn't know anything or I was just kind of jumping in. But for me, because I say a plot, but I really don't. I know some authors plot, every chapter or every scene and they know exactly what's going to happen. I don't. I basically just now plot beats, which is, halfway through the book, this is kind of supposed to happen, or 25% in, the first plot point happens, and this is typically what happens in the first plot point. So those beats are, in all of fiction, these are the things that typically happen in some bestseller code or however you'll get it. These are in a good story. I'm trying to think of a synonym for the word beat, right? The points of the things that need to happen or should happen.
Where something happens or like your story changes or a beat is a really great word for it.
Like beat. I know I'm not supposed to use the word, but and it's not necessarily to be married to them. Some people are. I'm married to them, but I've talked to authors and worked with friends of mine who are like, I want nothing to do with the beat sheet. I don't care. Have great books because they have that intuitive beat sheet within them because they've been reading for so long. So they might not have the first plot point at 25%. I do because I beat it out and I know, okay, I'm coming up on this many words, so I want this to happen. So, when I did get back Marlowe, I do have that nice, kind of roller coaster of emotions and type things. But maybe it's not 25% exactly for everyone, but it's a good guidepost for, do I have, at the midpoint, have I set everything up? Have I done all of the things that most good fiction does? And like I said, Jamie Gold, I'm trying to think of some of the resources that where I first started. Romancing the Beat was one that's specific to romance. K.M. Weiland, I already mentioned. And then Save the Cat. I just read Save the Cat for fiction. Is that what it is?
Yeah, there's the newer one, right?
And I just read that.
It was the screenwriter. Mm-hmm.
It's awesome. I kind of didn't think I needed it because I had read Save the Cat, which is 4 screenplays. And so I was like, well, I kind of already did that one. I don't need anymore. But I was on a car ride and so I listened to the audio, and that to me now that's like my favorite one. It was really kind of geared specifically for fiction authors. It's worth a listen or a read, even if you've kind of read all of the other ones and even the original Save the Cat. It's awesome. So I kind of blend them all together. And for someone who pantsed in the beginning, now I have a spreadsheet of all of them and all of the different beats. And I just kind of go across and look at, okay, what did this one say? What did that one say? What did that one say? How do I meld them all together in this perfect, making sure I hit everything I'm supposed to at the pinch point or whatever that particular beat is. So I definitely am a convert.
So you started off pantsing.
I did.
Even though you had a background in writing and you knew what we were supposed to do. Mm-hmm. You started off pantsing, and then at what stage in your career did you switch? Was it a slow, gradual change?
Yeah, I was at a conference. I'm trying to think if it was it was pretty early, actually. It was either going into book 2 or 3 or 3 or 4, somewhere around there. I was at a conference and someone had mentioned a book. Oh God, what was the first one? Kathy Yardley, Rock Your Plot. I don't know if you've heard of her. That's still one of my favorites. If I had to make a top 3, she'd be on it. Somebody mentioned it and I was like, Rock Your Plot. That sounds awful. I don't want to have to plot. But I read it because I knew I wanted to keep learning always. And I'm always reading something. So like, I'll read it. And it was simple. And it wasn't, I have to write out every scene. I don't want to know what happens. I just want to know what I'm heading toward. When I sit down at the computer, I want the characters to kind of just tell me what happens today, So, but you can still do that and plot. That's, kind of what I learned. What about you? I mean, where did you jump in on the process in terms of?
I started, and Mel gives a great point, beats markers on a road trip. Like that's a great way to think about it. I started out pantsing, and I was that person who had no training and just like on a whim decided to write a book one day. And I started off pantsing, and it wasn't probably until my 4th book, I rewrote probably 5 times. And when I say I rewrote 5 times, like completely different plot all 5 times. Like that's when I was like, okay, I've wasted so much time with this book. Like I've got to find a better process. And so I moved into planting, which is a plotter and a pantser.
Oh, that's the first time I've heard that.
Now, what I used to use, and I still use it in my courses, is panning liner, which is a pantser and an outliner. But my male students like hate that, which I don't blame them, and a lot of my female students hate it too. So yeah, so we settled on planter because it was like, you know, not as visual. So yeah, but yeah, so now I'm a planter. So I give myself complete creative freedom to, you know, abandon my outline at any point in time. And my outline literally just looks like I scribbled it on a napkin, and I have like 4 or 5 lines of just, you know, like my general, you know, plot. And then a lot of times I'll outline like my next 3 scenes that I'm writing. So when I go to bed that night, I know like I'm thinking through the next 3 scenes that are going to happen. And that kind of helps me like keep going in the right direction.
I love that. That's probably a way to kind of get jump started that next day and not waste time. And I saw that you have Maria on there. So Maria's actually one of the people I was thinking in my head who writes amazing, amazing books. And she's like, no plots, no plotting for me. So I know both ways can work. That's so cool about what we do. And there's lots of different approaches, lots of different ways to success. And, you know, even in craft.
There's no, that you're right. Like there's no wrong way to do anything. Like, does it mean that one way might take longer to get to the end? Like, yes. Does it mean that one way you're going to spend more time in rewrites? Yes. Like, but does it mean you're going to spend more time in prep if you're an outliner? Yes. Like, but everyone is different, and that's why all of our novels are so different. So I think the only to me, the only real like rules that if I was going to give someone a set of rules to follow is like editing. Like, don't neglect editing. Like, even someone who writes a super clean book can still benefit and should have, in my opinion, an editor. And then just not to get bored. Like, you know, if you're bored while writing, a lot of times your readers are going to be bored. But keep going, because you can fix everything once that first draft's written. So that's and a lot of the scenes that I thought were like, like I remember there are scenes that I thought about cutting, and I sent it to my beta readers. And one of the questions I always ask them is, what is your favorite scene and what is your least favorite scene? That's one of the questions I always ask my beta readers. And a lot of times scenes that I was really close to just nixing, they'd say were their favorite scenes. So
you struggled through it, but they didn't have to. They just get the end result.
That's exactly what it is. Like, they didn't see the hours spent in the kitchen. They're just eating the lasagna. Like, yeah, this tastes great.
That's a great analogy.
Something else. And yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and draw the winners for our. I actually drew the winners. Sorry, can't talk today. Right before we began. So thank you, random.org. So these are 5 winners. And then we're going to reach out to all of the winners via email, and you can choose which craft book you want. But we have Lindsay R. We have Terry B. Letitia, who I don't have your last name because we stopped collecting last names at some point. Misty B. and Sam B. A lot of last names with B. So congratulations to you guys, and thank you to everyone who entered. Every First Draft Friday for our initial 4 kickoffs, we're going to be giving away different things. So please come back and join us for future First Draft Fridays. And is there anything you want to add about craft? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. That's okay. No, I'm thrilled to be here. It was fun. I like to see people these days. So anytime I can, I'm like, yes, I'll talk with you. I'm so happy to. But yeah, there is one no right thing. I would say that for someone that's just starting out, except maybe not necessarily. You said that your one thing was editing. Sorry. And I would agree with that. And I found a good editor early on, so I kind of got lucky. But I would say just keep learning. Like as an recovering educator, I would say you can't go wrong if you keep learning. I mean, I'm 20 books in, and I just learned something today, and I'm excited to dive in and, make the next book even better. So that would be my one thing.
That's really good. I agree 100%. And like the good or bad news is there's always something to learn in this industry, like between marketing and publishing and everything else, like it never stops. But with craft especially, like the more you learn, the better and easier it is to write. And you don't have to learn everything at once. And writing itself is the absolute best training you can do. Like each book you get better.
Yeah.
So, I put the wrong URL up earlier, so I have already completely botched First Draft Friday. So that's good. I got our mistake out of the way early.
There you go.
So if you are interested in getting a Marla report, they're very inexpensive. You can get 2 reports a month for as little as $17 a month. So check out authors.ai, and absolutely please come back and join us again on another First Draft Friday. So it's great to have you guys. I'm going to let you get to your Friday evenings wherever we're at home around the world. Thank you guys.
See ya. Bye-bye.